Hi, I'm Andy, and this is my lesson on primitive data types in Java. In this lesson, I'll introduce you to the three most common primitive data types, int, double, and boolean, and show you how to create variables of those data types. I'll also show you how to make comments in your Java programs. Let's get started. We're going to start off this lesson by creating a few variables. A variable is a tiny section of memory in which we can store information. To make a variable, we first put the variable's data type, which indicates what kind of values will be stored there. In the first variable, I plan on putting the number 5, so the data type is integer, which Java shortens to just int. Then we put the name of the variable. For simplicity, I'll just name this variable I. This small section of code is called declaring a variable. When you declare a variable, you are carving out space for it in memory, giving it a name, and setting its data type. Lastly, I'll store 5 in that variable. Putting an initial value in a variable like this is called initializing the variable. This equal sign right here, which puts the value on the right into the variable on the left, is called the assignment operator. Now I want to create a second variable, this one to store the decimal 3.14. The data type for decimal values is called double in Java. The third variable I'll make can only have one of two values, true or false. That data type is called boolean. Once you have your variables created, it's easy to print them out with a printline command. Just make sure you don't include double quotes or else you'll print the names of the variables, not the values they contain. Notice that I put a blank line before putting my printline statements. These blank lines are ignored when the program is compiled and executed. We add them simply to make our program more readable and organized. Let's analyze this code so we can understand exactly what was happening in the computer when each line executed. When this line of code executed, the variable I was created in memory. I like to picture variables as little boxes into which we can put values. The assignment operator, the equal sign, initialized I with a starting value. The other two variables were created similarly. When the print lines executed, the computer grabbed the values stored in each variable and printed it to the console window. These three data types are called primitive types, where you can think of primitive as being synonymous with basic. So int, double, and boolean are three of the basic data types in Java. There are others like float and char, but these three are the most common and useful and are the only ones I'll use in all of my lessons. We call these variables primitive variables. Notice that values are stored directly in primitive variables. Later on, when I discuss more complicated data types called classes, you'll see that their data storage is not so straightforward. Now we'll modify our code and add another integer variable. Before doing so, let me comment out the boolean and double lines of code. We do that by putting 2 forward slashes like this. Or we can comment out multiple lines of code by putting these characters to mark the beginning of the comment and these characters to mark the end of the comment. Comments are lines of code that don't get executed. By turning these lines of code into comments, I prevent them from executing without having to delete them and lose them forever. Now we can create another integer variable, this one called myOtherInt, and store the number 8 in it. Notice the weird spelling I use for my variable name. This is a naming convention used in Java and other languages called camel case. The first letter of the first word is lowercase, and the first letter of the other words are uppercase. It's not required, but I highly recommend you name your variables using camel case. Now I want to show you how to change the values stored in your variables. We use the assignment operator for that. Notice that when we change the value of a variable, we don't put its data type out in front. If we did, we would be telling the compiler to make another variable called I. This would cause a compiler error since you can't have two variables in memory with the exact same name. Down here, I'll then add some printline statements so we can see what happened to our variables. Okay, let's see what happened line by line. These two lines created the two int variables in memory and initialized them. Next, this line of code executed. To understand what happened here, remember that the equals sign does not mean equals. It is the assignment operator which takes the value on the right and stores it into the variable on the left. Next, this line of code puts the value of 7 in myOtherInt. Notice, code is not retroactive. The previous line of code, which changed I, does not execute again. I's value remains 8. So when we print the value of our two variables, we get 8 and 7. And that wraps up this lesson on creating, initializing, and changing primitive variables in Java. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching and coding with me today.